diverse and welcoming place for more people. Turning those values into action really inspired me to lead the Our Mayor, Our Choice ballot measure last year that now allows you to elect our mayor using ranked choice voting. You now have a stronger voice in our democracy. My priorities will be housing, transportation, homelessness, and rejuvenating our economy. All of these vital issues need to be tackled through the lens of climate resiliency and equity. What I find interesting is that how do we measure what kind of community we are? Well, I measure Boulder's greatness not by how green our open spaces are or the abundance of trails that we have, but by how well we lift up those that are most vulnerable in our community. I want your help to take who we are and to really make it into where we are going. My name is Matt Benjamin, and I'm running for Boulder City Council.
Thanks, Matt. I think you said that Michael Christie was next. Okay. You're on for 2 minutes, Michael.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Alan. Thank you all of PLAN-Boulder. And for those of you who are participating, I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. My name is Michael Christie. I too am running for Boulder City Council. A little bit of history about who I am. I am a family law lawyer by trade, a certified mediator and a certified collaborative law attorney. I have deep roots in public service. I was a JAG officer in the United States Air Force. I was deployed to Afghanistan and Kuwait shortly after 9/11. I was an intern at the White House during the Clinton administration. I am currently a volunteer at the Boulder Shelter for the Homeless. I am a volunteer at Boulder's Community Mediation and Resolution Center, where I help mediate cases between landlords and tenants. And about a year and a half ago, I was appointed by City Council to sit on the Cannabis Licensing and Advisory Board. I am running because I believe I have a unique skill set in my personal and professional experience, particularly as a mediator, to bring people together who have very opposing viewpoints, help them find common ground and come to reasonable solutions. And my hope is to use that skill set as a member of City Council as we try to navigate through some of the challenges that are currently facing our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Steve, you're up.
Good evening. Thank you, Peter and Alan, and thank you all for joining this forum. My name is Steve Rosenblum. I'm a dad and a husband in a bilingual, multicultural family, and I'm passionate about making Boulder a more welcoming, sustainable community. I'm also an economist and a mathematician and an expert in housing and government finance. For the past 20 years, I've invested in communities, analyzed government budgets, and created housing for the elderly, disabled, and the unhoused. Throughout my career, I've successfully brought people with diverse backgrounds, different perspectives, and strong opinions together to overcome complex problems by listening, working hard, and treating people with respect. I'm running for council because I believe my unique skill set and experience will allow me to have a meaningful impact on Boulder's most critical issues, such as housing, homelessness, climate, and budget. I believe on these issues and so many more. There's so much common ground to be found and progress to be made, but only if we start talking to each other and listening to each other. I believe that we share common goals and values to protect our climate, local environment, and our city from the ravages of global warming, to put our budget on a sustainable path while investing in our infrastructure and supporting our values, to create safer, more convenient transportation alternatives, to bring forth the diverse housing mix our city needs to foster a diverse community and promote opportunity, and to make our local government more responsive to our needs and priorities. Please join me in my goal to make progress together and visit my website at steveforboulder.com to learn more.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, we'll go with the next question. I think we're going to be starting with you, Steve.
No, we need Jacques DeCallo.
I'm sorry.
We skipped, and in fact, we skipped Jacques.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jacques.
Happens.
No, you shouldn't.
Shouldn't happen. We apologize.
No worries. I'm Jacques DeCallo. I'm running for Boulder City Council because I'm from Boulder. I was born and raised here, and I was always brought to believe that Boulder was on the forefront of sustainability as a nature-loving, environmental town. When I got back from my 5 years in Bellingham, Washington, I slowly realized that Boulder wasn't as sustainable as it claimed to be, that there were vast areas that we could update, that we need to impose new regulations, new ways of living, essentially, that's more sustainable and that pushes for a healthier, greener city. My ideas are improving solar grants, bringing gray water recycling to the city, and creating passive income off renewably mined cryptocurrency. All these ideas are ideas that I learned in university, and I think it's very important to have a young person on city council to bring these new ideas forward. That's why I'm running for city council. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry for the mix up in the order, but we'll start going. Peter, you said going opposite from last to first.
Yeah, so for this round, let's start with Steve Rosenblum, then we'll go to Jacques,
okay,
and then Michael, and then Matt.
Okay, so question number 2, this is a longer one to give you a little more time to give more broadly your views on the topic. It's about affordable housing. And the question is, what do you think are the specific areas of concern for housing affordability in Boulder? The following are areas of interest to PLAN-Boulder in case you want a little more shape to this general question. And the things that we've been interested in are what you think about who needs to be served, how much housing should we add, how much is enough, should we try to house anyone who comes to Boulder or works in Boulder and can't afford housing, how should we pay for the affordability increment of housing? What kind and where should we add affordable housing? And what are acceptable and unacceptable impacts on neighborhoods? So you take that however you want to, Steve, and you got 3 minutes.
Thank you. So any policy discussion should begin with a clear definition of the problem we're trying to solve and an agreement upon the facts. So let's start with the facts. In contrast to what many often claim, Boulder is building housing. The 2020 census shows that Boulder has added nearly 3,000 housing units over the past decade. Over the same period, the vacancy rate has nearly tripled from 2% to 6%, which is higher than any city in the county. Yet over the same period, as we all know, housing costs have risen substantially. More supply has not created more affordability. So what can explain this apparent paradox of more supply leading to higher prices and more vacant homes? I've studied the issue in detail and I have an explanation. There is a mismatch between the type of housing that national investors have wanted to build and buy versus the diverse housing mix that would actually serve our community's needs and what our in-commuters tell us they want. A survey of our 60,000 in-commuters revealed that folks are willing to pay more and accept less to give up their commute and live in Boulder, but not in a one-bedroom. Boulder Housing Partners does an incredible job leveraging federal dollars to create income-restricted, affordable housing. But when people's incomes rise above the regulatory thresholds, or they want to start a family, they're forced to leave Boulder because our single-family homes are too expensive and the types of housing available in our rental market do not meet their needs. This is referred to as the problem of the missing middle. More data supports the claim that we're building the wrong type of housing. Elementary school enrollment has dropped by 4% since 2010 and an accelerating rate since around 2014. We've already closed down the Mapleton School, the Washington School, and more closures will be necessary if we don't turn the tide. The 390 completed units at Boulder Junction yielded just 8 students to BVSD. In contrast, the Holiday neighborhood did attract families, and particularly the duplexes and triplexes. While I appreciate the desire to build as many units as possible, I'd like to see more families to be able to attain housing in Boulder for the long term and remain part of our community. So where should we add this housing? I'd like to correct another false claim you may have heard recently. It's been stated that 85% of our land is zoned for single-family detached residences. This is simply wrong. The actual number is 35%. We have substantial capacity to create new, great walkable neighborhoods out of our old strip malls and shopping centers with large, underutilized parking lots and along transit corridors. We need to change our zoning framework to incentivize the development of more duplexes, townhomes, courtyard apartments, and live workspaces. We can create attractive housing which is close to parks, amenities, retails, and walking or biking distance to neighborhood schools. This will allow more young families to attain housing in Boulder and allow seniors to downsize and stay in Boulder.
30 seconds.
Lifestyle and needs. I've studied and invested in housing markets across the country. I know which policies actually serve communities versus merely catering to national investor demand for ultra-dense micro apartments and student housing. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, next is Jacques. Do you want me to reread the question, or are you?
I think I have it here.
Okay, great.
Yeah, no worries. I'm just gonna start a timer for myself. Okay. So looking at the housing issue right now, we have to include diverse housing. It's important to house people who have been here for years, the elderly people who can't afford to be here anymore. We have to prioritize them. We have to look at family housing and increasing that as well. And we have to look at housing students. For CU, CU does need to be more involved in that sense, though. They need to kind of pick up their pieces. Going into my notes here, sorry. I don't think there is a point of too much housing in Boulder. We just have to look at sustainable areas where we can build this high density housing with walkable pathways, with parks and areas for families to grow. And then we have to look at the way we're constructing houses. That's a big thing for me, is if we are going to build these high density houses that are going to create more carbon in our atmosphere in the long run, we have to look at building them in sustainable ways with sustainable materials. We need to look at ways other countries have been building high density houses with sustainable materials, such as hempcrete in France and England, ways communities in Australia have been using gray water recycling. I am for adding to the housing. There is areas to do it, but we have to do it in the right way, and that's something I will push for on City Council. Just looking at my timer here.
You still have a lot of time.
Okay, yeah, perfect. I'm just checking my notes here. We have to look at who we're prioritizing to be in this affordable housing. We have to look at people who have been involved in the community, who have been volunteering in the community, have been helping out in the community. People who are first responders should be, prioritized to get into the community. People who are teachers, nurses, these types of people who deeply care about the community and want to see Boulder become a better place should be actively considered for affordable housing. Boulder is a high valued area. It's always been a valued area for people to live in. So we should build a community that represents how we want to be viewed on the rest of the world. We should be looked at as an example for the rest of the US as the standard for a healthy, friendly, livable community. So when we're talking about adding housing, it's not just where we're going to do it, but how we're going to do it, because it is going to happen in Boulder. Boulder's designed to have a growth of space, but we have to do it as inclusive for families and for everybody.
30 seconds, Jax.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and one last thing is that we have to include sustainable transportation into these high density neighborhoods. If we're going to push people out to the outskirts of the city, we have to be able to get them into the city in a responsible way. So if we're going to have low income housing or affordable housing, we have to have free transportation for these people to get their jobs in the city so they can save money and better themselves and provide for their family. I wrap it up.
Thank you, Jacques. Michael?
Yeah, and Alan, I don't need you to repeat the question. I think I'm good to go.
Okay.
So I believe that the biggest areas of concern for housing affordability in Boulder are probably the cost of land and the jobs housing imbalance. So I think we need to be looking at the tools that we have to address this need. For example, rezoning and infill are tools that can be used. We could rezone older dilapidated shopping centers in commercial areas, which can be used to build a diverse range of housing for low, moderate, and middle income households, what Steve had referred to earlier as the missing middle. So I'm talking about developments that have a range of like townhomes, cottage houses, row houses, something that's designed around some green space. So you actually are creating a feel of community as opposed to just creating density. I believe that these developments should be centrally located around a mobility hub for easy access to alternative forms of transportation. So I'm not talking about trading single family zoning for student housing. What I'm proposing gets us both. It gets us single family and student housing. So it's a win-win. Other tools that I believe that we could be looking at are, for example, the down payment assistance program and that program's capacity to create deed restricted, permanently affordable housing. Inclusionary housing is another tool. I also believe that we need to be putting cash in lieu money to work where we can, as soon as we can, in collaboration with Boulder Housing Partners. With respect to whose needs or who needs to be served, I would characterize this group primarily as the missing middle. how much should we add? How much is enough? We do not have the means to house anyone and everyone who comes to Boulder. It's the sad reality of the community that we live in. But it's important that we address as much of the needs as we can so that we can maintain a thriving and diverse community with people of all types of cultural and socioeconomic backgrounds. But it's a balancing act. There's no easy silver bullet solution to this. It's my understanding that right now our infrastructure is designed to support a population of about 110,000 people. So right now Boulder's at about 106,000+. So we simply cannot accommodate everyone who wants to come and live in Boulder. We have what I would describe, and I've heard this phrase used by many others in this community, an inelastic housing market. Simply adding more housing is not going to drive down housing prices. I agree with the data that Steve had quoted earlier. Just you could build 1,000 more homes, and I don't believe that you're going to see a decrease in housing prices as a result.
30 seconds, Michael.
Yes. One other thing that I'm not opposed to exploring, I would like to explore the idea of increasing the commercial linkage fees to help offset some of these costs. I do believe that new businesses should be paying their own way. And then do you want me to answer 2A and 2B now?
No, I'm going to ask those questions separately. Got it.
And to end, I do believe that we need robust community input whenever we're talking about these types of developments. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Michael. Matt.
Well, really what it comes down to with housing is we can't view these things in a silo. Housing is also a transportation issue, and it is also a climate resiliency issue. And so to just think of housing unto itself misses so much more of what we can accomplish as a community. And maybe start with a personal story. I met my wife about 12 years ago playing indoor recreational volleyball. It was broken up into 2 teams. There were about 10 couples/family units. 12 years later, there are 2 of these units left in Boulder. 8 of them could no longer afford to live in this town and raise a family. And so, yes, we do talk about the missing middle, and it's worth giving credit to Boulder Housing Partners for doing a tremendous job with the money they have to leverage state and federal resources to build truly affordable, as it is defined by Housing and Urban Development. But it's about general affordability of, can people who want to and make good money still live in our community? And that's simply not the case. And as Steve pointed out, and I would absolutely agree with, the canary in the coal mine here is school enrollment. I just sent my kindergartner, my son, off to kindergarten, and they have fewer classes than they have in past years. Some schools are combining kindergarten and first, and they're doing everything they can to keep schools open. And that is so much at the heart of the vitality of our community, is making sure we have young, vibrant, working families. And the other big thing that I would like to see accomplished is, how do we change our land use and zoning? We have not done a thorough enough job at looking at some of the single family zoning along our transit corridors to look at gentle infill, to think about duplexes and quadplexes. Again, it is not the brick and mortar of the buildings that's so expensive, it is the land. And so if we can amortize out or share the cost of the land among more than 1 to 2, 3, or 4 families, we inherently get more affordability, where people get to come live in our community and they're no longer driving. And that's the key. Yes, we're not going to house everybody that wants to be here, but if we can peel off some of those in-commuters who work here or their kids go to school here, then we're doing a good job in addressing our housing, our transportation goals, and being a more climate resilient community. It also means we need greater flexibility in our building codes to accommodate greater creativity and looking at new ways to innovate different housing solutions. And lastly, I've heard at this forum, and I've heard, in past years, and I heard people in the community say, CU needs to do more to contribute to our housing. That's exactly what the annexation agreement with CU South is meant to address. There's 1,100 units and 5 acres for affordable housing. This is exactly the kind of thing that addresses our housing, takes in commuters out from traveling from our sister communities, thank you, Karana, and immediately gets them closer to our community at a multimodal hub. So housing is critical, but we have to be clear as not picking and choosing. And if we're begging for housing in a housing crisis, beggars can't be choosers, and we need to take it where it comes.
Thanks, Matt. We're now going to do these questions are sort of like lightning round questions, just with a yes or no. And I'll start with Michael. I guess we'll go backwards around the first time, but starting with you. Some have suggested small parcels of Boulder's open space be sold off for housing. Would you pursue this?
And Alan, I apologize. Do you want any explanation or just a yes or no?
If you need to take a sentence to clarify that, go for it. That's fine.
That would be a hard no.
Okay. Jacques?
No.
Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, no, just because of carbon sequestration, we need to preserve that and help with climate change on all fronts.
Great. Steve?
No, we have plenty of other options to meet our community's goals, and we shouldn't kill the golden goose, which we've invested in for many generations.
And we're back to you, Matt.
I say no as well. We've got plenty of work to do within the limits of where our building envelopes are to make headway.
Okay, the next one is the same yes or no with a sentence to support it, or whatever you want to use to define why you're saying yes or no. It is, would you support any changes or exceptions to the 55-foot height limit? And let's start with you, Jacques.
Initially, no, especially in Central Boulder. If it was put on the outskirts and these buildings were built in a net positive way that actually produced more energy than they consumed, and it was, you know, far out of the city, more on like the northern end or even like Gun Barrel area towards there, possibly. But my initial reaction is no.
Okay, Steve.
No, not a question we need to ask for the next 50 years. So not during my service on council.
Okay, Matt.
Well, this is actually a nuanced answer, because I think there are circumstances where going a little above 55 feet meets our community goals. If you have a building that's already at 55 feet and it's using its envelope, why wouldn't we allow solar panels to stick 1 or 2 feet up above that? As of now, they would lose an entire floor just to get solar on the roof. So for climate resiliency, that makes sense. Maybe community gardens. Maybe we're thinking about in downtown area, more restaurants. So we have more community ability to enjoy those rooftops and have and enjoy the views that we so much appreciate here in Boulder. So I think as long as it's benefiting our community, we should consider those in very special circumstances.
Okay, Michael.
No.
Okay. The next question is a 2-minute, slightly longer transportation question. Transportation both impacts and is impacted by development decisions made by the council. What should be done to reduce the impacts of the 60,000 commuters that already arrive in Boulder? And what steps, if any, should be taken to balance employment and workforce housing in the city? And I think we're starting with Jacques this time.
Okay, so for transportation, I think we need to look at how the RTD budget, I think we need to vote on reallocating money from the RTD budget to more sustainable forms of transportation that are new age, such as autonomous transportation. It cuts down on costs of labor, it cuts down on costs of maintenance on the vehicles, because EVs are extremely cost effective. It's also a good way to provide or get these large corporations like Microsoft and Google involved in our community and get them to pitch in on bringing in a higher density of population to Boulder, kind of turning it into a tech hub, which is what I've seen it turn into over the last 10 years, essentially. It's like a new age Silicon Valley in my mind. But, you know, if we get this new technology in on it, that could help resolve the issue. You know, you got to look at putting structures on the outside. Outside of the city center area, you know, closer to the industrial side or closer to 36 near the Table Mesa Park and Ride, and promote those parking areas, and then give people free transportation. And you show them the cost effectiveness of your time versus, you know, driving around Boulder looking for parking, paying for parking, all this stuff, when we can have infrastructure that helps give them free parking, gives them free transportation, and shows them that their time is actually worth their money. So I think providing new forms of ideas to look at transportation and shifting people's mentality on taking public transportation Yeah, and then we also have to look at like how many of those vehicles are single occupancy vehicles. You know, there's a lot of people just commuting by themselves, and that's just taking up more space, polluting more carbon dioxide in our city center. And so, you know, we really have to look at studies that show what our air quality would be with and without all these single passenger vehicles. So transportation is huge, looking at reallocating the money and investing in ourselves instead of in a statewide effort that hasn't really been that beneficial for Boulder. Also looking at a light rail system, I think would be huge between Longmont to Boulder, and then Denver to Boulder, and even Golden to Boulder, who knows? But there's options out there. Thank you.
Thanks, Jock. Steve.
Thank you. So Boulder should take bold steps to reduce the amount of people in commuting every day in single occupancy vehicles, which are polluting our air, warming our climate, overwhelming our transportation system, and making our roads less safe for bikes and pedestrians. We can incentivize a change in community behavior with a combination of carrots and sticks. We should explore congestion and parking pricing systems, which have been successfully implemented in cities across the world. We should adopt and enhance the way-to-go carpooling system that has been getting cars off the streets in Denver. We should renegotiate our financial and service relationship with RTD. RTD has not been a good partner. With our EcoPass and Fast Tracks taxes, Boulder's subsidizing a system that isn't serving our needs. We should look at the $9 million per year we send to RTD and evaluate whether we can instead create more locally funded initiatives like the HOP, which actually match our transportation needs. We should explore creating a system of timely, reliable, and frequent electric buses that will give in-commuters a viable alternative to driving alone. We should also complete our safe local biking network so that doing the right thing by the climate is the safer, more convenient, and more cost-effective option to get where you need to go. E-bikes are rapidly declining in prices and improving in quality. This is going to open up safe biking to a whole new set of people who were previously didn't want to arrive to work sweaty or couldn't make it up and down Boulder's Hill. So we should enable and incentivize the purchase and use of e-bikes.
30 seconds.
I'm all done.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, Matt, you're up.
Well, as I said earlier, housing and transportation are intrinsically connected, and certainly as we deal with it with regards to our climate crisis. There are many ways in which we can consider thinking about reducing 60,000 in commuters. First and foremost, housing. Housing chips away at that because a lot of people work here, either at the university or downtown or at other businesses. And if they have a place to live, we've immediately cut many, if not tens of miles off their commute. I would like to also say that, we also had an interesting opportunity, and this is where we have a positive outcome of COVID, right? I have lots of friends and families that when COVID happened over the last year and still to this day, they became avid bicyclists. They bought their first e-bikes. It was like probably a rad wagon, so they should shuttle their 2 kids. And now they're interested, they're invested. But you know what, where we're not invested is in the infrastructure to support this new wave of bicyclists in our community. And so this is the right time for us to really advance bike safety and also protected bike lanes and really go aggressively to make sure we can provide a safe environment. Because I would hate to lose these individuals and families who are now avidly wanting to bike once things get busy again in a post-COVID life. And so this is where we have to be adaptable to changing conditions and seize the moment to make those investments in our community. I think it's also important to be investing in EV charging because even if it's single occupancy, I'd much rather it be an electric vehicle than a gas-powered one. And we also need to be building climate resiliency throughout the community. One way to think about that is centralized parking with multimodal hubs. If we can get people to park along the outskirts of our community and then use our multimodal network, we are reducing the buzzing around our community, which is of course adding to our climate issues. And then lastly, this has to do with the housing that we're building. We should be eliminating or drastically reducing our parking minimums with new housing developments. Because at the end of the day, we're not then building for the next 20, 30, 50 years when we reduce or eliminate our dependency on cars. So we should be building that future now. And if we're building along our transit corridors, there's no need for all of the vehicles and all of the parking that we're contributing to those new developments. And mostly importantly, by forcing parking, we're then reducing the ability to actually have more housing on those lots, which then goes counter to our housing goals. So these are things where we have to be forward thinking and most importantly, be investing in our values to make sure we're providing a proper environment and a quality community for generations to come.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, the next question is one of our long ones on the
Alan, I didn't get to go.
Oh, I'm sorry. Somebody needs to help me with this one. Okay, sorry, Michael. Go.
That's all right. You know, us lawyers, we like to talk. So, you know, right now, Boulder, we have approximately, I believe it's 106,000 city jobs. And by 2040, Boulder's projected to have about 117,000 city jobs. So the number of in-commuters that we see today is only going to continue to increase. So we need to be aggressive in our approach if we're serious about combating this problem. And I'm not talking only about, you know, our efforts to reduce traffic congestion, but also to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions and protect our environment. I mean, generally speaking, the way I see it is that people drive their vehicles because it's easier than alternative modes of transportation. So if we can make alternative modes of transportation more appealing and more convenient, I believe that we can work towards our goals in helping to combat this issue. I believe that we can achieve this through the expansion of the countywide EcoPass program. When I referenced earlier about having new businesses pay their way, I believe that they should be providing EcoPasses for their employees as a cost of doing business in Boulder. Or alternatively, let's say, for example, if they have 200 employees, they should pay for and dedicate 200 EcoPasses back to the city so that they have a net zero transportation impact. You know, it's been mentioned on this call earlier, and I certainly recognize the sordid history that the city has with RTD. Eventually, what I would like to see is have us move toward our own regional electric bus transit system with our neighboring cities. And I recognize that there's an enormous cost and time constraint to get a project like that off the ground. But to help fund such a project like that, we can look toward, you know, the federal government's $1.2 trillion infrastructure package, of which $39 billion is specifically dedicated to public transit. I'm also not morally opposed to exploring a sort of peak travel fee for commuters where you would have a lower income
30 seconds, Michael.
Sure. Lower income commuters and Boulder residents could apply for an exemption. This may be a little more problematic to achieve legally, but I know that we do that for parking at our trailheads, where residents of Boulder City are not required to pay the parking fee. So this may also be a viable option for us. I also, you know, I applaud Matt's enthusiasm for improving our biking infrastructure. I'm a huge proponent of that. I cycle all around this town. I believe we need to make our bicycling infrastructure safer and more accessible, and we need to increase on the bike lanes that we have. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Okay, now the next question is a longer one on the annexation of CU South. Given the level of community conflict on this issue, how would you have approached the question of flood mitigation and annexation of CU South to come to a more acceptable outcome? The following areas, because this is a big issue where you could probably talk about the details for a long time. The following areas are of interest to PLAN-Boulder. How would you have gone about defining the problem to be resolved, developing and evaluating alternative options, balancing responsibility for safety and protection of downstream residents and property among the city, CU, and property owners, evaluating the input of city professionals, staff, and consultants, and what weight would you give informed citizens, citizen experts, and the general citizenry, and how would you include them in the process? How does climate change and the likelihood of increased and more severe flooding in the future influence your thinking regarding flood mitigation? So those are just some of the areas that we're interested in, and you shape it the way you wanna discuss it. And Steve, you're up.
In 3 minutes.
Sure. So I'd like to answer this question a bit differently from what you've heard many times before. I'm not going to extol the virtues of the annexation agreement, nor decry where I think the deal falls short. Instead, I'd like to again focus on the facts. Fact, CU owns this land. The story of how they came to own it is a cause of some grief, but is no longer relevant to the discussion at hand. Fact, CU is a state institution with sovereign rights. This means that Boulder has much less influence and little legal recourse to influence their decisions. Fact, the West Valley neighborhoods were built in a floodplain, made worse by the construction of Highway 36. Fact, alternative options for upstream flood mitigation have been thoroughly evaluated and deemed unviable. The combination of these facts, which we cannot change, means that we must proceed with a flood mitigation project on this parcel under a negotiated agreement with CU. And that is exactly what our city staff and our Mayor Sam Weaver have done. I've spent many hours reading through all the documents and all the studies which have led us to this incredibly complex and carefully negotiated agreement. I've also spent many hours speaking directly to Sam about it. From this research and my time spent with Sam, I have strong conviction in three things. One, there are few people in this community who understand every detail of this agreement as well as Sam. From the hydrology, legal obligations, transportation and environmental impacts, Sam has mastery of them all. Two, Sam has listened to your concerns, incorporated them into the agreement, and negotiated the best possible deal for the city. For every objection I've raised, he has a well-researched and compelling response. Lastly, Sam is a tough-as-nails negotiator. I've negotiated many deals in my career. I'm skeptical that anyone could have reached a better deal for the city of Boulder than Sam was able to achieve, given the constraints and the unbalanced pressures on the parties, like he was able to do in the Muni settlement. However, just like the Muni settlement, I believe that a decision of this magnitude, with such major implications for the future of the city and our relationship to CU, requires democratic legitimacy. CU has generated strong emotions and conflict between some groups in our community, but I think the majority of voters do not understand what's at stake. We don't even have a final draft of what's actually in the annexation agreement. The ballot measure, to let voters decide, will not allow time for a fulsome community conversation about the merits of the final agreement, and city staff has taken the view that it will be null and void, even if it passes. Fortunately, we have an option available which will avoid a lengthy and rancorous legal battle, and that is the referendum which will put this critical decision before voters in 2022. I will sign this referendum, and I encourage others to do the same. This will allow permitting and engineering on the flood project to proceed without delay. But it will also let the people make an informed, democratic decision on CU South. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Matt, you're up.
Well, this is an issue of health and safety. This is an issue of people's lives and livelihoods. Mark Wallach said last night, it was by the grace of God we didn't lose more people in 2013, and he's not willing to bet on that luck again. And neither am I. Let's be clear. This is very simple. It's complex in all of its nuance, but it's really simple. Do we have a moral and ethical obligation to protect the lives of 2,300 people who are in harm's way for the next major flood? I think we do. And this council is the most experienced council with regards to flood mitigation we have had, and we currently will have, and we will have into the future. And so trusting this council, like Sam Weaver, and I would make sure we don't forget Rachel Friend, who has been a champion of this much longer than Sam, and the two of them have done a great job at leading those negotiations. I will also remind people watching that outside of two recusals, it's pretty much going to end up being what looks to be like an 8-to-1 vote for city council in support of annexation. That's a pretty tremendous sense of unanimity when you think about a very complex issue. And we might want to trust their judgment, having looked at it and having much greater expertise on the issue than just about any of us residents. When it comes to trusting our experts, staff is incredibly qualified, and so are the engineers that have reviewed this. Remember, this was all set up in terms of the process and the goals in the Boulder Valley Comp Plan. So relitigating this and going over stuff and reanalyzing things that have already been done are nothing but slowing down tactics. These do not move us forward, and unfortunately, we end up with the same results, which is they are unviable, and they are not in the spirit of moving this project forward and providing maximum protection. And Steve is right. CU and the university are a sovereign entity, and this is the best deal we're going to get. To think that we could walk away from this deal now and expect to get a better deal from them later, or think about the worst alternative, which is in about 8 years, CU has the right to consider annexing into Superior or another community where we lose all authority, and all say in what goes on there, this is the best deal for what we have, given the circumstances and the ability to protect the life that we have. Let's not forget all the community benefits that are associated with this that CU had no reason to sign on to, but did because they were a good partner.
30 seconds.
All of the housing, we have height limit restrictions, we're gaining open space, we're gaining water rights to a creek, we're gaining 5 acres of affordable housing. These are massively big wins for our community. And I would lastly say that it is, with regards to the vote, I don't think it's appropriate for voters to decide who gets to live and die. And that's really what this measure would do. And I think that would further divide our community and further add to the divisiveness. And I think it's really important we let our elected officials who are tasked with protecting health and safety to ultimately make that decision on our behalf because we elected them.
Thanks, Matt. Michael?
So I am in full support of flood mitigation. And I believe that as a governing body, our top priority is the safety and security of our citizens. I mean, we have approximately 2,300 residents who are potentially in harm's way. Boulder is the highest flood risk city in Colorado. And given climate change, it's not a matter of if, but when another major flood will roll through Boulder. So I believe that we need to be doing all we can to ensure our community is safe. As for the annexation agreement itself, look, I mean, I recognize that it's easy for me or anyone else who was not in that negotiating room to be critical of the draft agreement. And I, as a lawyer, looking at the language of the agreement itself through my lawyerly lens, I have some concerns about the language of the current draft. Particularly with paragraph 36B that talks about the disconnection or the de-annexation. My read of that language is that if we do not receive approval from the required agencies to go forward with flood mitigation, the way that draft agreement reads, disconnection is solely at the discretion of CU. I don't believe that that's appropriate. I think that that language needs to be changed. If we do not get approval for flood mitigation, we should have a way out of that contract. I also have concerns about paragraphs 39 and 40, which talk about the right of first offer and the right of first refusal. In my opinion, if CU wants to sell that land, there is no way the city of Boulder is going to outbid a private developer. So I would like to see language in the final agreement putting forth a cap or a formula to determine what the city would have to pay to buy that land. I mean, look, we all know what a contentious issue this project or this has been for our community. This issue in and of itself has created a lot of polarization. I have had a lot of very passionate conversations with people on both sides of this argument or of this issue. But as for process, based on the input that I've had from several community members, they all seem to complain that the process of negotiating this agreement could have been more transparent. My sense is that if the process itself was more transparent, we probably would not see as much deep-rooted anger over what is happening today with the agreement that we have. With respect to input from city staff, professionals, expert consultants, I absolutely would involve them in the process, and I would give their input the appropriate their appropriate weight based on their credibility, just as I would if I were sitting as a judge in a case before me.
Michael.
Thank you. But I do believe that having those professionals and those experts involved in this process is imperative. And I value the opinions and the recommendations and the comments that they have. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Jacques?
Yeah. So I think a couple things on this weren't taken fully into consideration, and that's the environmental impact from building on this land. This land is a huge carbon sequester, and there are a couple endangered species that live in this floodplain as well. So I think the environmental board should have been taken into consideration before signing off on this with the university. So that's one thing. Two, the floodplain. They're designing for a 100-year flood. What we experienced in 2013 was more of a 500 or 1,000-year flood. So we need to expand the flood mitigation. It's not enough. If they think that tiny underpass under 36 can hold the amount of water and allow for safe water stress release from the flood. I don't think that's possible. I don't know what CDOT's going to do if this does get decided, if they're even going to allow that, like a retaining wall that would have to be built against 36 even to be put up with the pressure of another drastic flood that is most likely going to happen in the coming years with increased water vapor in the atmosphere from climate change. So, I just don't think the environmental side of it was really taken into consideration. I think there's other parcels of land that could be negotiated and traded with to CU for preservation of this open space. Specifically, there's a northern area of 36. I believe it is Area 3 Planning Reserve is what it's called. And this area is low risk to flood. This area is already pretty close to the highway, so infrastructure can be set up, water, sewage, that sort of stuff can be set up fairly easily. I just don't think there was enough full research done into CU South to make sure that's a viable area to build on. I think there's other areas in Boulder that we have designated that could be used and are more sustainable. So looking into that, I mean, in the sense of if nothing else can be agreed upon and CU is going to sell the land to a private buyer, I'd rather have Boulder take ownership of that and then, work with the university to build affordable housing and recreation facilities and do flood mitigation for what we can. But I don't think the full idea was fully thought out. I think there's better solutions than
36 Jax.
Yeah, that's pretty much all I have on that.
Okay, thanks, Jacques. We have a couple yes/no follow-up questions here, and some of you have already answered them pretty clearly, but let's run through them. Starting with you, Matt. Do you support let voters decide on CU South annexation ballot measure?
No, as I said, I don't. And it's really a simple thing of this is a matter of life and death. And I just think of the conscience of if we slow this down 2 years from now, if we don't make this happen, the voters that said no to this will have lives.
This is a yes or no question.
So I got to add some context, but I just think it's inappropriate to be saying yes or no to people's lives like that.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Matt. Michael?
Yeah, I mean, I firmly believe in the democratic process. There obviously was, a big enough community concern to get that ballot measure on the ballot, and I support that process. I will say I'm concerned about the legality of the measure if it passes with respect to its retroactive application.
Jacques?
I do think there should be a vote. I'm an advocate for the democratic process as well. And I think that with that being on the ballot, there should be a full environmental analysis and impact put with it as well.
Thank you. Steve?
No, the city has already said it's null and void, which will lead to a possibly decade-long legal battle. I support another measure, which is the referendum.
Okay, coming up. Okay, the next question is a yes or no question. If the city council annexes CU South before the November election, as is currently planned, will you sign the planned referendum petition that will seek to undo this decision? And Michael, you're up on this one.
Yeah, and I apologize. I know this is a yes or no question, but I believe I need a little bit of context here. So I will not sign the petition because I personally do not believe that it's appropriate for any candidate to sign the petition during their campaign on an issue that is likely to come before them if they are elected. I believe that it creates a possible conflict of interest. And in my opinion, it's crossing an ethical line. So by signing the petition during my candidacy on an issue that may come before me, I don't feel comfortable doing that.
Thank you. Jacques?
I would, as a concerned citizen of Boulder.
Okay, thank you. Steve?
So as I said, I would sign the petition. I think that the sort of scaremongering that Matt's engaging in about a delay, we should immediately have an early warning system and evacuation system for those residents to make sure that there's a storm coming, we get them out in due time so there's no life safety risks. And then once again, this referendum wouldn't cause any delay because permitting and engineering could continue apace and the voters would have a choice on whether this is the best agreement for the citizens of Boulder.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, we're moving on to climate change.
I would like to answer that if I could,
I'm
please.
sorry, Matt.
Matt, it's Matt's turn.
Okay, help me out here. Sorry, Matt.
No worries, all good. No, I would not sign the petition. I think Michael brought up a great point about conflict of interest. This would set us back and likely start the process all over, because if you're not going to work with CU, then it pretty much ends any ability to negotiate any engineering there. And setting us back 8 years to a decade, I don't think is appropriate, because these lives need to be saved and protected now.
Okay, thank you. Sorry to skip you there, Matt. Okay, we're going to move on to a 2-minute question on climate change. And Jacques, you're going to start this one out, and that seems perfectly appropriate.
You going to read us the question,
Yeah,
Alan?
I am. Just using Boulder as an example, how do you see the role of local government in addressing climate change? What are the critical areas to focus on? Water, flooding, energy? What should Boulder be doing to prepare itself for climate change and to mitigate our own contributions to the problem?
Yeah, wonderful. This is my favorite subject. This is what I went to school for. I'm very passionate about these things. Boulder should be doing everything they can on all fronts to promote environmental consciousness, from, teaching, composting, and recycling, and limited single-use plastic in the schools, and teaching kids how to be sustainable on the small level, all the way up to possibly implementing a fee on single-use plastic to reduce the amount of single-use plastic that our society generates. I think, we have this kind of out of mind mentality with climate change and with all the issues addressing it. So that helps bring that to the forefront. If this fee is implemented, then we can use the money from this fee to increase solar grants to allow for more solar on rooftops in Boulder, and then possibly solar farms with battery reserves. So if we get these battery reserves, then we can push XL to, working with XL is a whole nother thing in itself, because XL, as sustainable as they claim to be, they're still over 60% reliant on fossil fuels. So we have to push them to, flip their grid so that fossil fuels are only used for emergency reserves, for a backup generator if all the batteries fail, if the wind turbines can't operate or anything like that. So, getting solar on more houses, getting solar farms set up in Boulder is a step to push XL to be like, okay, we have to do this or else we're not going to be making any money. And that's what they're doing. They're raising our electricity rates 12% right now, and there's no need to do that. They are a monopoly. They're squeezing every penny out of us while we're still relying on coal and natural gas for energy. So we have to take the incentive into our own hand to get the power into our own hands. Because once we have the power, then we have to know how to spend with that. One more thing with that is, if we do get solar on more houses and we're able to get solar farms and all that set up, then we can start generating our own cryptocurrency with a city coin. And we can use that money from the cryptocurrency to invest in more infrastructure. And then it's a cycle that benefits not only our own wallet, we can mine our own crypto and create our own passive income, but we also create a passive income for the city, and that can be used in a multitude of ways. So I'm very passionate about this, and I hope we can push forward to sustainability.
Steve.
Okay, Boulder should be working simultaneously on 2 fronts: reducing our greenhouse gas emissions as fast as possible, while also protecting our city and our local environment for what may come. The most effective levers we have to reduce our climate impact are electricity consumption and transportation. Voters decided to partner with Excel to move to 80% renewable electricity generation by 2030. So the next council must ensure that they are meeting their obligations, including keeping our energy costs affordable. The 12% rate increase they're seeking this year is not a good sign. But we need to get to 100% clean energy as fast as possible while building resilience and flexibility. Council should lobby to support Edie Hooten's Community Choice Energy Bill, which will give us the ability to buy green electricity on the open market at much lower rates than Excel is willing to provide. We should permit the installation of community microgrids. Battery technology is rapidly evolving, and we'll soon have the ability to store meaningful amounts of solar energy. Independent grids will also retain critical power in the event of a natural disaster. We should also require Excel to provide real-time information on the source of electrical generation. This will allow us to implement innovative, intelligent technologies to concentrate demand for electricity during times when the sun is shining or the wind is blowing, not when coal is burning. To build resilience to more extreme weather and weather events, we need to invest in state-of-the-art early warning, education, and evacuation systems for floods and fires. We need to stop building in floodplains, preserve surface permeability and groundwater flow. We need to maintain and enhance our tree canopy and take other steps to reduce heat island effects, such as limiting the amount of land covered in concrete. Finally, we need to preserve and protect our open space, sensitive habitats, and biodiversity so they have a better chance of adapting to a changing climate. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Matt.
All right. Well, climate change is the existential crisis we face as a species. In fact, it has become the Anthropocene. We are creating the next global extinction event on our planet. And as a result, there's really no reason to feel like we should be delaying anything. And that's why I guess I'm a little troubled with hearing two separate things. We have absolute urgency with regards to address our climate crisis and climate resiliency, yet we need to slow down on providing flood protection for 2,300 people on CU South. Those do not mesh. And I think we need to be consistent in our values and our application of how we think of climate resiliency in the face of a climate crisis. It is imperative that when we think about our climate resiliency, we realize that underserved and lower income communities contribute the least to climate change, but bear the greatest cost. And so equity is of vital importance to us as we think about everything we address in our community. It is about water, it is about flooding, it is about energy, it's about housing and transportation, our wild urban interface, and our open space. And with regards to water, I've actually had a chance to be working on the community working group for stormwater and flood management's master plan working group. And what we are finding is that we are grossly behind in terms of our maintenance of our stormwater infrastructure. And so this is how we convey water throughout any storms. And we are not working from a place of proper deferred maintenance, let alone a maintenance schedule that keeps us up to task in an adaptable climate changing environment. So we need to invest in that infrastructure and make sure we are properly managing it. And that's the same with open space. We have a $40 million deferred maintenance. We simply are not taking care of the assets and resources we have. And so in order to be resilient, we got to start thinking about those resources and finding creative ways to pay for it. I would say we also need to evolve our building codes to allow greater creativity in the face of climate resiliency, and also add greater incentives for buildings and residents to go above and beyond our net zero and other climate related goals. I would also like to see, as I've said before, eliminating parking minimums at housing developments to reduce our carbon footprint and rely better on our public transportation. And lastly, I'll end with the unsung part of our open space. A third of our open space is agricultural land, and we must do a better job as a community supporting our farmers and leading Colorado in the Front Range in regenerative agricultural practices, because this is where we get our food. And if we can't create a closed loop, proper food system in our community, it's hard for us to ask others to do the same. And so we need to walk the walk instead of just talking. And I want to lead with action that leads to results for our community in generations to come.
Thanks, Matt. Michael?
Yeah, Alan, the question asked, the call of the question is, how do you see the role of local government in addressing climate change? Well, I believe that the city sets the standard for the rest of the community to follow. In that regard, I believe the city must be aggressive in our approach toward combating climate change and moving us towards reaching our climate goals. For example, 100% renewable energies by 2030, reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 80% by 2050, and becoming carbon positive by 2045. I believe that Boulder's proposed framework for climate action in the Climate Action Plan is actually fairly comprehensive. One of the more notable strengths of the framework is the idea of working to pilot new financing options to improve the affordability and increase access to clean energy technologies for all of our community. This also aligns with Boulder's racial equity plan in the city's efforts to strive for equality and inclusion. I will say one major weakness I find, though, is that there seems to be a lack of commitment from the city to reduce the amount of bureaucracy that community members are subjected to when attempting to implement alternative ways to save energy or water. I've had several conversations with community members who all seem to have a very common complaint, and that is that it's nearly impossible and takes years to get the city's approval to make a modification to their home. Well, if we're serious about addressing climate change, then we need to make that process as smooth and as efficient as possible. We should not be having this bottleneck. Again, sort of what Matt was saying, you hear a lot of talk, but we need to be more in terms of implementing action to addressing our goals.
Michael.
Thank you. One of the critical areas that I think we need to be focusing on is reducing carbon emissions, which I believe can be reduced both by producing power more cleanly and using less of it within city government and also in our residential and business sectors. The city owns about 385 buildings. 75% of the city's carbon emissions generated from buildings come from 25% of the 385 city-owned buildings. These gas-powered buildings are generating a significant carbon footprint, and they are in need of deep retrofitting to convert them to renewable energy sources. I recognize that replacing that entire infrastructure is a massive undertaking and probably not likely to be achieved in the immediate future. So what can we do in the meantime? We need to be actively promoting the production and use of renewable green energies such as solar, wind. The city has an opportunity here to lead by example, not only by insisting that its own power comes from renewable sources, but also making it easier for households in Boulder to do the same.
Thanks, Michael. Our next question is on public safety. It's a 2-minute question. This year, Boulder experienced a mass shooting, and many residents have expressed concern about increased crime and public safety in our public spaces. How do you view the issue of public safety in Boulder? What are your concerns? Is our approach and investment in addressing public safety and homelessness on the right track? What is the role of policing versus social services? And Steve, we'll start with you.
Thank you. So public safety and welcoming shared spaces are the primary responsibility of government and a prerequisite for everything else we care about: our local businesses, the environment, enjoyment of our parks and open space, social cohesion, mental health, alternative transportation, and healthy neighborhoods. Data from the police department confirm what many in our community have seen with their own eyes. Crime in our community has increased substantially in recent years, and safety has deteriorated. Motor vehicle theft, burglary, breaking and entering, arson, aggravated assault, and intimidation have increased between 30 and 260%. Millions of dollars of property have been stolen, which police believe is funding the importation of dangerous drugs into our community, such as methamphetamine and pills laced with fentanyl. But according to the district attorney's office, there's not been a single arrest for which they can pursue conviction. In the past several months, we've also had 2 drive-by shootings, 2 incidents of sexual assault by a stranger, and most recently a murder in Boulder. So what can be done to reverse this worrisome trend? One of the most well-established results in criminology research is that more police on the streets both prevents crime and protects lives, especially in vulnerable communities. In Boulder, we've run this experiment in reverse. Since May 2020, we've lost 42 officers out of a force of 184. The Boulder Police Department is understaffed and overburdened. We must replenish their ranks. We must also stop asking them to respond to calls for service when another method would be more effective and more appropriate. Police are being asked to respond to a large number of nuisance complaints on Hill. CU should enact policies which extend their residential code of conduct to include off-campus housing to ensure their students are good neighbors.
30 seconds.
The consequence should be academic discipline, not a citation from police. Police are also being asked to respond to proliferating illegal encampments, which have been a separate source of community concern. We need to focus on connecting these vulnerable people with either housing or services to address the underlying causes of homelessness, whether substance abuse, financial need, mental health issues, or some combination of them all. There are 2 critical questions for voters to ask this election. Do candidates believe a further defunding of the Boulder Police will lead to an increase or decrease in crime? Do candidates believe that overturning the ban on camping in our public spaces will increase or decrease both the safety of the unhoused and our community? Before choosing who to vote for, make sure you get clear answers to these important questions.
Thanks, Steve. Matt.
Thank you for asking the question about public safety. As someone who lives but a 1-minute bike ride from King Soopers, I'm reminded of this daily. As a parent of a 6-year-old, the hardest conversation I've ever had to make as a parent, as a human, is having to explain that to my child. Many other parents in this neighborhood and around the city have had to do the same thing. And in doing so, explain it to themselves, or at least try. I would like to say that, it's important for us to think about crime and safety, not just for the people that have it well, but also for the people who don't have it well, and that there's equity in the safety that we provide in our community. Chief Harold, in a June 22nd meeting with council and an update, made it very clear crime has stabilized, in contrast to what you've heard. So it's important for us to make sure we have the facts and we hear it directly from the chief's mouth. And it's also important to know that we're down 30 officers and we are losing them faster than we can replenish them. And so does throwing more money at that actually solve the issue of hiring? It doesn't. And so as much as we should have a few more police officers, we have money sitting there that is just not being utilized while we wait for more officers to be hired. And so one question is while that money is sitting in a bank, we have ready projects that can help reduce crime and provide greater safety in our community. And we should be investing in those. And those things are like the Denver and Eugene program, like STAR and Cahoots. These are programs that provide a medical person and a mental health professional to be the first responders to calls that police would otherwise respond to. It's important for us to look at these solutions as ways to take the pressure off our overburdened police force. This is about being pragmatic and being evidence-based in how we look at those things. And keep in mind, it is not just our police who are overburdened. I've spoken with a number of firefighters at stations around the community, and roughly 30% of their call volume is also going to homelessness. Same with our EMS. So we need to think about how do we unburden the rest of our emergency services, and how do we provide a better opportunity for them to do the calls they're meant to do, and how do we get the proper professionals to help our unhoused residents get the services they so desperately need.
Thanks, Matt. Michael?
Yeah, I mean, I believe that public health and safety are paramount for a thriving community. Providing safety to me is the most basic requirement and obligation of a governing body. Since the pandemic, the data shows that we've seen an increase in crime anywhere from 30 to 243%, depending on the crime. And we need to get a handle on this, and it needs to be now. I believe we need to expand on the resources and support necessary to keep our neighborhoods safe, our businesses safe, our public spaces safe, and our residents safe. I do not believe in defunding the police. I believe it is of dire importance to staff our police department to the full complement of 190 officer positions. The Boulder Police Department is understaffed right now by approximately 30 officers. We've lost 16 officers since the end of April. We need to find solutions to lessen some of these burdens on our officers. I believe Council's June 1, 2021 authorization of the $2.7 million towards addressing public safety and the encampments is a step in the right direction. Can we be doing more? Yes, we can always be doing more. It's tragic when we have people in our community who've been dealt a set of life circumstances that cause them to have to sleep on the streets and in encampments. We need to prioritize the one thing that the evidence and the data show to work, and that is a housing first strategy. But, in Boulder, the city, we have limited resources. We cannot do this alone. We need to have, the city doesn't have the financial or physical resources to continue to provide the bulk of homeless services for the county, let alone other cities and states. The recent lifting of the residency requirement to qualify for coordinated entry should help in getting more people into shelter and off the streets. Also, with the opioid settlement money, we'll see additional funding coming through to help our housing first strategy and other wraparound services. Boulder should be receiving approximately $500,000 a year, plus more money to the county. And I also applaud Representative Judy Amabile in securing $450 million in ARPA funds at the state level to set up regional mental health and drug addiction facilities. I mean, look, I'm a volunteer at the homeless shelter. I'm very aware and sympathetic of our unhoused population. These efforts will fill a gap. They're not going to solve the problem. We can always be doing more, but this has to be done in a compassionate and empathetic way. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Jacques?
Yeah, thank you. I think there's a couple solutions that could possibly work to this. One is looking at what Denver did with the support team assisted response, which is their STAR program. Instead of typical calls that the police officers would respond to, they had paramedics and mental health advisors and all these people go out, and the dispatchers would contact the STAR group instead of police officers, and it would reduce the stress on the police officers in Denver, and then allow for the homeless people to build relations with people and actually give them a sense of validness. I think that's a huge thing that homeless people lack, is having a sense of purpose in society. They feel like they might be tapped out, that life hasn't thrown them anything, or they can't achieve anything. So we have to, work to resolve their mental health issues and work to resolve giving them a purpose. So there's been examples from areas where they take buildings and they create indoor greenhouses essentially off of aquaponics systems. And then through the aquaponics system, they teach the homeless people how to grow their own vegetables, how to harvest the fish and cook the fish and prepare the vegetables, and give them skills to get jobs in kitchens. So then later on, they have the actual skills to get a job. This also gives them a sense of responsibility and holds them accountable to something, to come in and actually be a part of a community. And that's something I feel a lot of homeless people are missing. Drug addiction is another huge issue. I've seen it firsthand with homeless people. I've picked up needles in the creek. I've talked to homeless people about their symptoms and their withdrawals and what they're going through. And I think we need more outreach to help people feel comfortable getting sober, and encouraging them to get sober for better life opportunities. There's the Bridgeway House in Boulder that helps with that. The homeless shelter has empty beds every night. So I think it's just getting more first responders and therapists and mental health professionals on the streets and involved with these people, and building relations is key. Once you build a relation, get to know them, make them feel like they're part of the society, they want to help the society. Thank you.
Thanks, Jacques. We have a couple follow-up quick questions, yes, no, to start out with. And we'll start with you, Matt. Do you support the ban on camping on public land in Boulder?
I hope I can add a sentence of context.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. I appreciate that. So I do not support the camping ban if we don't have a place for them to go. I've been down there plenty. I was actually just down yesterday helping feed about 100 of our unhoused residents, and they're just moving to different spots. It's not solving the core issue. And so we need to provide stability and reduce crisis and trauma in order for them to have the best chance of success with the services we provide. So just having a ban without a place to go is sort of counter to our moral and ethical obligations to help our unhoused.
Okay. Michael?
Yeah, thanks, Alan. Yes, I do support the camping ban, but I believe that it has to be enforced with compassion, and it also has to be paired with robust services, including improved behavioral and mental health support, in addition to a long-term strategy, including the county, the region, the state. There has to be a collaboration with all of us to address the unhoused crisis. We need to get those people in those unhoused environments and in the encampments into the services that they so desperately need.
Jacques?
I think, could you repeat the question again? Sorry.
Sure. Do you support the ban on camping on public land in Boulder? So,
no, I don't support the ban, but I think they need to be given a proper space. There's areas in California that have created public camping areas for people who are subject to homelessness. So, maybe if there's an area we could actually locate for them to set up camps where they could have a community sense of feel, that might be a good solution to that. That's not actually like centered downtown, because we've literally just been pushing them up the creek up to Scott Carpenter and such, and so that's just unnecessary. So if we gave them a designated zone, maybe that would help. And then that allows for us to monitor them in a community setting as well and try and assist getting them back onto their feet.
Thank you. Steve?
I support the camping ban. We need to focus on the only thing that works to resolve homelessness, and that's housing and connecting people with supportive services. So encampments threaten those outside them as well as those inside them. Not because of the sleeping that occurs there, because of the vandalism, defecation, assault, discarding of contaminated items, open drug use, and harassment of passerby. Anti-camping is also necessary to control the risk of wildfires. The Scurb wildfire that burned more than 400 acres of Los Angeles started as a cooking fire at an encampment. Encampments also imperil the environment. Before moving cleanup services in-house, our city paid ServPro to clean up thousands of needles and buckets of human waste from encampments, risking E. coli and fecal-bone coliform infection into our waterways. So yes, I support the ban on encampments.
Okay, thank you. The next it was a yes/no question, but there was a question asked by one of the candidates last night, so we expanded it slightly. And so take a minute or so. Do you support defunding Boulder Police, by which PLAN-Boulder means less funding for police and more funding for human services? And Michael, we're starting with you.
Thanks, Alan. No, I do not support defunding the police. I believe that there is always room for improvement. I support Chief Harold's efforts in bringing reform to the police department, but with respect to using the term defunding the police, no, I do not support that.
Okay, Jacques?
Yeah, I mean, defunding the police has to be defined in a specific way. So if you're looking to move some funds to help with mental health issues and to help with civil services, yes, but also we need to keep funding the police to maintain a strong force. You know, looking at where the money is coming from, we don't need military grade weapons in our local police department. We don't need to have all this excess spending on certain parts of it. So, you know, keeping the police officers at a proper salary and keeping them with the proper adequate materials that they need to have a healthy life and be good civil servants is very important. So it just depends on where the money's coming from.
Thank you. Steve?
No, I do not support defunding the police. Cities across the country have realized what a flawed slogan and policy that was. What I do support is always having a constant focus on the effectiveness of the $23 million that we currently spend on housing and human services, in addition to the millions of dollars we contribute to the county, which comes back to us. What we're currently missing is mental health and substance abuse treatment programs, which I support the creation of residential center so that people who are struggling with those problems can then access the other plethora of services we have, such as Ready to Work, Bridge House, permanently supportive housing, etc. But right now, our social safety net has a huge hole, and we need to close that hole with services.
Thank you. Matt?
I do not support it. It's a slogan, not a policy. So I'm kind of disappointed that the term's even being used, even in the Q&A here, because I think it just comes down to, you know, what are we doing? Are we looking to reform our police or not? And I won't predetermine the budgetary outcomes before we've done the work to understand what our police are doing and how they impact and what are the community needs around that. You know, police reform may well result in a smaller budget, but I don't consider that defunding. I mean, it makes it seem like it's a punitive measure. And so I think it's really important for us to look at what are our goals and what do we need to do to achieve in our community. And that will just determine what the budget is. So I think that's really important for us to keep an eye on. We got to still do the work and do the research and make sure we know exactly what we're doing before we make grand statements of defund, not to defund, keep the funding whole, or anything like that.
Okay, thank you. That is the end of the questions that we have written out for you to answer. We're going to take a couple minutes, minute or a couple minutes for each of you so you can wrap up and you can tell us why we want to vote for you, or you can talk about something that you feel is really important that we've missed in the questions that we've discussed tonight. And I'm going to leave it up to you to take, to do whatever you want to do in the final couple minutes. And we're going to start with Jacques.
Wonderful. Yeah. So, you know, I think one thing that I'd like to touch on is getting businesses involved to help reduce the congestion of transportation issues in Boulder. So, you know, looking in, just reaching out to businesses and reaching out to their employees and seeing what kind of solutions they would be open to, as opposed to driving to downtown Boulder every day. So definitely getting their input would be a strong suggestion. But apart from that, the main reason I'm running and the main reason you should vote for me is because I want to completely redesign the way Boulder consumes electricity. I want to completely redesign the way Boulder's looked at as a city in Colorado and as a city in the US. We need to be on the forefront of sustainability. We have to push forward on every force that we can. We have to, allow green energy to be more accessible for houses, allow it to be a quicker process. We need to do everything we can to allow for the green revolution. Thank you.
Steve?
Thank you. I'd like to go back to a question of who needs to be served and how much is enough. The answers are complex, but the highest authority should be whatever mix of policies lead to a sustainable and cohesive community. As cities grow in size, they foster synergistic wealth creation, less per capita energy consumption, greater information sharing, and creativity. But larger size is also correlated with crime, traffic, pollution, systemic inequality, and fiscal burdens. As Boulder has grown, we have felt these pressures. I've met with many groups over the past few months, all of whom believe their causes need more funding. The library, the arts, housing and human services, transportation advocates, parks and rec, and open space. Everybody needs money. We've accumulated hundreds of millions of dollars in unfunded infrastructure and facilities needs. We can continue to accommodate more growth by making our systems more efficient, by changing our behaviors, and by adopting new technologies which enable things like work from home. But our decisions across all aspects of government should feed back into sustainability. All policy proposals should answer the following question: how can we create a welcoming, diverse community which preserves our high quality of life, high levels of service and amenities, while setting our budget and environment on a sustainable path? So I hope you've gotten a glimpse of how I form views and opinions. I do my research, focus on the data, seek out the best arguments of people who disagree with me, and try to prove myself wrong. I encourage you to reach out to me, both during the campaign and after, to share your views with me, because I will listen and I will adjust my views. Thank you very much. I encourage you to go to my website, steveforboulder.com, reach out to me for a coffee, send me an email. I'd love to get together. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve. Matt.
Well, I just want to, as I started, and I'll certainly close with the same thing, I want to say thank you to Peter and Alan for hosting this and the rest of the PLAN-Boulder team. These are always great, informative forums, and they always have been. And so I look forward, even though this was a different one in a virtual setting, I do appreciate the efforts and getting the tech right. So thank you guys for forging ahead. COVID has exacerbated every issue we've been dealing with in our community and has certainly introduced new ones. But as we look at the tough side, the hard side of COVID, there's also tremendous opportunity as we forge our way through COVID. And I want us to see that opportunity. And I want us to think about what is the Boulder that we can be? What are the things that COVID has unlocked us from, has untethered us from? And I want us to think about how we can make ourselves a more diverse, inclusive, and welcoming community. We're losing 4 council members, maybe 5, depending on whether Mark gets reelected or not. And that's a combined almost 25 to 30 years of institutional knowledge and experience. And as we face those complex issues, I think voters are going to want to have some experience at the table. And that's what I bring. I have worked with council for years. I've worked with staff. I've worked with community members. And that involves spending time on 2 community working groups to evolve our campaign finance election reform. I've worked with Alan on that working group. And it was a great time for all of us. I'm now on the stormwater and flood management master plan working group. I've managed a number of campaigns and then led the Our Mayor, Our Choice campaign, which now gives you, the voters, the power to elect our mayor using ranked choice voting. None of that would have been capable without collaboration and finding the best way to get solutions that work for everybody. And that is what I will bring to council. And at the end of the day, what it comes down to is finding those places where we have shared values and ultimately investing in those values to make Boulder the place we know it can be and the place that we've grown to love. My name is Matt Benjamin, and I'm running for Boulder City Council. And I encourage you to visit my website at mattbenjaminforcouncil.com. Thanks, and hopefully you have a great evening.
Thanks, Matt. Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Alan. Thank you, Peter. Thank you to all of PLAN-Boulder and the 55 participants. I saw it get up to, I think, 59. But I certainly appreciate everybody taking the time to listen to all of us. I respect all of the candidates who are running. This has been a process. This has not been easy, but I think it shows a strong commitment that we all share in terms of giving back to this community and trying to move our community in a positive direction. It's obvious from the responses you heard tonight, and I'm sure last night, that, we don't agree on all the issues, but that's what politics is all about. I think for the voters in this community, you need to look at each of the candidates individually, and you need to ask yourself, is this person qualified to sit in that seat on council? And do they have the skill set and the leadership ability to guide our city in the direction that it needs to go? I hope that you see those qualities in me. I certainly believe in myself. I believe that I do have the ability to offer that to this community. I am not pretending at all to have all of the answers to the questions. There are some very complex challenges that we're facing, but I firmly believe that I can add value to the conversations around those issues and trying to get us moving in the right direction. So again, I appreciate everybody being here. I look forward to continuing the conversation. If you have any questions for me, please reach out to me. You can always go to my website at www.michael4boulder.com, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. And again, thank you, Alan, thank you, Peter, and thank you to PLAN-Boulder.
Well, thank you all so much. Thanks to the 4 candidates who were able to make it tonight. Thank you all for joining us. We will be putting a recording of this forum and last night's forum up on our website, and PLAN-Boulder will be meeting on Monday next week to make our candidate endorsements, and we will release that information to the Daily Camera once it's ready. We look forward to seeing everyone out on the campaign trail, either in person or virtually. And we really thank everyone for their service to our community and for taking this effort to step forward. It is a big deal, and we really appreciate everyone's effort and commitment to our community. So thank you all very much, and we look forward to seeing you all soon.